Good morning. Today we are going to learn about the rest of the nervous tissue that we haven't covered in the first class. So in the first class we have covered structure of neuron. We learned how to draw a schematic diagram of the neuron showing the various parts. Then we learned the cross section of the peripheral nerve and optic nerve, how the optic nerve is different from that of the peripheral nerve. All this we have covered, and we have also learned about the neuroglia. Today we are going to learn the topic under the following headings. We are going to learn about myelination. So last time we just learned what is the function of myelin sheath. Today we are going to learn how this myelin sheath is formed. Then we learn about ganglia. Then we learn about synapse, few things about the nerve injury, and few clinical correlates. So we know that in the peripheral nervous system, the myelination is done by the Schwann cells, whereas in the central nervous system, it is by the oligodendrocytes. In the peripheral nervous system, we can see first the Schwann cell is going to lie in close proximity to the axon, and the axon is going to invaginate into the Schwann cell cytoplasm, so that the Schwann cell completely invests the axon and a double layer fold is formed, and this double layer fold is called mesoaxon. Now what happens is the Schwann cell rotates around the axon so that the mesoaxon will spiral and it will elongate. So it will spiral and elongate, and between the layers of the mesoaxon the lipids are going to get deposited, and thus the myelin sheath is going to be formed. Okay, so first we have the Schwann cells which completely invest the axon so that the double layer fold mesoaxon is formed. Then the Schwann cell will rotate around the axon, and the mesoaxon spirals around the axon and it elongates, and several layers of mesoaxon concentrically arranged around the axon, and lipids are going to get deposited and it is going to form the myelin sheath. Okay, and myelin sheath consists of alternating light and dark layers that is made up of lipids and proteins. The light zone consists of lipids and the dark layers consists of proteins. So that is how the myelin sheath is formed. So this is the myelinated nerve fiber. This is the yellow structure is the axon, and this is the myelin sheath, okay, which is laid down by this Schwann cell. And we can see that at the periphery of the myelin sheath, there is a thin layer of Schwann cell cytoplasm with the nucleus of the Schwann cell and the outer cell membrane. So these three components, the outer cell membrane, the cytoplasm of the Schwann cell, and the nucleus of the Schwann cell, together are forming neurolemmal sheath or the neurolemma. So we have the myelin sheath around the axon, and at the periphery of the myelin sheath, you get the neurolemmal sheath, which consists of the Schwann cell cytoplasm and the nucleus. So as the mesoaxon spirals in the axon, the cytoplasm of the Schwann cell is pushed to the periphery that forms another sheath that is known as neurolemma. There is an inner collar of cytoplasm that is in close proximity to the axon, around the axon, and the outer collar of cytoplasm that forms a neurolemmal sheath. The inner collar of cytoplasm and the outer collar of cytoplasm are continuous with each other at two regions. One is at the region of the nodes of Renvir. This is known as perinodal cytoplasm, and also within the myelin sheath through clefts. These clefts are called Schmidt-Landermann's cleft. Here you will get the inner collar of cytoplasm, and here you will get the outer collar of cytoplasm, and these two are continuous at the perinodal region, perinodal cytoplasm, and also through these oblique clefts which are called the Schmidt-Landermann's cleft. These clefts are cytoplasmic tunnels which extends from the outer to inner collar of myelin sheath and contains Schwann cell cytoplasm. This is a diagram showing the axon and the Schwann cell. The Schwann cell is rolling around the axon like rolling up a calendar, and this is the oblique cleft that we see, that is the Schmidt-Landermann's cleft, and it rolls up in such a way so that many layers are formed, many layers of mesoaxon are formed, and when lipids get deposited, they are going to form alternate light and dark regions. So these light regions are the regions of lipids, and the dark regions show the regions of proteins. So thus the myelin sheath is formed. And these are the oblique clefts. This is the oblique cleft where you get the Schwann cell cytoplasm, and at the periphery also you get the Schwann cell cytoplasm with the nucleus, and that is known as the neurolemmal sheath. So this is again the myelin sheath around the axon. This is the inner collar of cytoplasm, and this is the outer collar of cytoplasm, and the outer collar of cytoplasm also contains the nucleus of the Schwann cell, and that is known as forming the neurolemmal sheath. This is the cross section, and this is the transverse section. This is again just another diagram to show the axon and the Schwann cells that is wrapping around the axon and forming myelin sheath for short segments of the axon. So many Schwann cells are involved in the myelination of one axon. So that is about the peripheral nervous system. Now coming to the central nervous system, here we know it is the oligodendrocytes which is going to myelinate the axons. So here they have several short processes Each of these processes are involved in the myelination of many axons. So they wrap around the axons and they form the myelin sheath. Like in peripheral nervous system, they also wrap around the axons and form the myelin sheath. And so here you will get the nodes of Renvir. So we get the nodes of Renvir. They present at regular intervals, but the Schmidt-Landermann's cleft are absent. So that is one of the difference from the myelination in the peripheral nervous system. And also another difference is one oligodendrocyte will deposit myelin sheath around several axons, whereas in the peripheral nervous system, one axon is myelinated by many Schwann cells. What about the unmyelinated nerve fibers? We already saw in the last class. In the peripheral nervous system, Schwann cells are present. The axons are simply going to invaginate into Schwann cell cytoplasm. And there is no further spiraling elongation of the mesoaxon, so this myelin sheath is not formed. It is only going to provide structural support. Whereas in central nervous system, they are not forming in a sheath, and they are simply going to run freely among the neuronal and the glial cells. Okay. Now we'll go to the most important topic of today's class, that is ganglia. Collection of cell bodies of neurons within the central nervous system is called nucleus, whereas collection of cell bodies of neurons outside the central nervous system, that is known as ganglia. Okay, so collection of cell bodies outside the central nervous system is ganglia. Similarly, collection of nerve fibers within the central nervous system is called tracts, and collection of nerve fibers outside the central nervous system is called peripheral nerve. So that is what we saw in the last class. We learned it's simply bundles of axons in the peripheral nervous system. That is peripheral nerve, and the same collection of nerve fibers within the central nervous system, they are called tracts. Okay, so today our topic is ganglia. So what is ganglia? It is the collection of cell bodies of the neurons outside the central nervous system. And there are two types of ganglia, that is spinal ganglia and autonomic ganglia. So first we'll study about the spinal ganglia. So spinal ganglia we already know. The example is the dorsal root ganglia. So it is present in the course of the dorsal root of the spinal nerve. That is why it is called dorsal root ganglia. This is the cross section of spinal cord, and this is the ventral root that is arising. This is the dorsal root. Okay, these two will join and form this spinal nerve. This is the dorsal root, and this here you can see a swelling, and that is the dorsal root ganglia. And within this dorsal root ganglia, you have collection of many nerve cell bodies. This spinal nerve is connected to another ganglia. Can you see here? Here also it is connected to another ganglia. All these ganglia are the sympathetic ganglia. We know that on either side of the vertebral column, we have a sympathetic chain, and this sympathetic chain is made up of sympathetic ganglia. Okay, so this is the sympathetic ganglia and this is the spinal ganglia. So example for spinal ganglia is the dorsal root ganglia. So this is the structure of spinal ganglia. So today's class we have to study about the structure of the spinal ganglia. So this is showing the dorsal root. This is the dorsal nerve root and this is the ventral nerve root. And in the dorsal nerve root there is this swelling, and that is the dorsal root ganglia. And these two will finally join and form the spinal nerve. It is covered by a connective tissue capsule. There is a connective tissue capsule covering it, and then we have collection of, you can see, aggregations of cell bodies of neurons. Okay, and these neurons are pseudo unipolar. In the last class also we saw in the dorsal root ganglia we have the pseudo unipolar neurons. These cell bodies are large and they appear round, and they are pseudo unipolar neurons. And in between these groups or of cell bodies, we have the nerve fibers that are also passing in between these cell bodies. So what are the microscopic features? We have the entire ganglion covered by connective tissue capsule, and it's an aggregation of cell bodies of pseudo-unipolar neurons. This is a high power view showing the pseudo-unipolar neurons. There are some nerve fibers also that pass between the groups of pseudo-unipolar neurons, and each cell body, here it is surrounded by a single layer of flattened cells. You can see here it is surrounded by a single layer of flattened cells. These flattened cells are called the satellite cells or the capsular cells. These satellite cells are providing structural support to the cell body, and the nucleus of the cell body is large, it is central, it is round, and it has a prominent nucleolus. This is a very important feature. The nucleus is round, central, and it has a prominent nucleolus. This is the lipofuscin granule, that is residual bodies that is formed by the lysosomal activities. These are the lipofuscin granules. So this is how we will draw the spinal ganglia. Okay, so there is a capsule, and then there we get aggregations of cell bodies of pseudo-unipolar neurons with nerve fibers passing between them. And these pseudo-unipolar neurons are large cell bodies with flattened cells around them, which are satellite cells. And the nucleus is round, central, and with a prominent nucleolus. So we have to draw all this when we are drawing the spinal ganglion. So this is how it appears under the microscope. This is the nerve fiber that is passing between, and this is aggregation of the cell bodies of pseudounipolar neurons. This diagram is the high power magnification. You can see the many number of satellite cells and the round central nucleus with prominent nucleolus. This is another microscopic picture. Here we can see the aggregation of the pseudounipolar neurons. This is the satellite cells around them and the round central nucleus, prominent nucleolus. So that is about the spinal ganglion. Now we will learn about the autonomic ganglion and see the difference of autonomic ganglion with the spinal ganglion. So autonomic ganglion is of two types, that is sympathetic ganglion and parasympathetic ganglion. This is a sympathetic chain with the sympathetic ganglia that is located on either side of the vertebral column. So here the preganglionic fibers, okay, that is arising from the spinal cord, the preganglionic fibers will relay in the sympathetic ganglia. So the preganglionic fibers are short, whereas the postganglionic fibers are going all the way to the viscera. The postganglionic fibers will be longer. Now coming to the parasympathetic ganglia, these parasympathetic ganglia are seen in relation to few cranial nerves and to the sacral nerves. And here these ganglia are related in close proximity to the glands which they are going to supply. So the preganglionic fibers, which are these bold blue lines, they are going to be longer as compared to the postganglionic fibers, which are these dotted lines, that is going to be shorter as they are located close to the glands which they are going to supply. So that is about the parasympathetic ganglia. Be it parasympathetic or sympathetic, microscopic features are the same. That is, here also it is covered by a connective tissue capsule. We get cell bodies of multipolar neurons. In spinal ganglion, we have cell bodies of pseudounipolar neurons. Here it is multipolar neurons. So the shape will not be exactly round because we have dendrites arising from the cell body and we have the axon arising. So these are multipolar neurons. What about the size of the cell bodies? The size of the cell bodies is smaller as compared to the spinal ganglion. They are large cell bodies, whereas these are small cell bodies, and they are not aggregated together. They are widely spaced. They are scattered within the ganglion, and the nucleus, you can see, it is not in central in position, it is eccentric in position. Okay, it is large and it is eccentric in position, and here also they have conspicuous nucleolus. And what about the satellite cells? The satellite cells are less in number. The satellite cells are present, but they are less in number as compared to the spinal ganglion. There are numerous dendrites and nerve fibers in between the cell bodies. We can see the dendrites and the nerve fibers that is running between the scattered multipolar neurons. You can see this is the section showing the autonomic ganglion. They are not forming aggregation, they are just scattered here and there, and these are multipolar neurons. They are smaller than that of the pseudounipolar neurons that we see in the spinal ganglion. We can see the nerve fibers that is running between them. We can see the eccentric nucleus, okay, and less number of satellite cells around the multipolar neurons. This is very important difference between spinal and autonomic ganglion. So here they are large sized and they are closely placed, whereas here they are small sized and widely spaced. They are scattered. Okay, the position of the nucleus, here it is central and it is round. Here it is round, but it is eccentric. And the satellite cells, they are more in number, whereas here they are less conspicuous. They are less in number as compared to that of spinal ganglion. And here it is pseudounipolar neurons, and here it is multipolar neurons. So this difference we have to keep in mind to identify the spinal ganglion and the autonomic ganglion. So this is how the spinal ganglion looks. We have the pseudo-unipolar large cell bodies with the round central nucleus and many satellite cells around them. These are forming aggregates. They are arranged in groups, whereas here they are scattered. They are here and there, and they are multipolar neurons. So shape will not exactly be round. Okay, and the nucleus is also eccentric. There is prominent nucleolus, and the satellite cells are present, but they are less as compared to that of the spinal ganglion. How will we draw the spinal ganglion? This is an easy diagram. We can see we have to show a part of the capsule, and then we can show nerve fibers that is running in between the aggregates of the pseudounipolar neurons. So these are the cell bodies, the hyper view. So the cell bodies we can see with satellite cells with flattened nuclei around them, and the nucleus is central, large, round, and having prominent nucleolus. So this is how we draw it in groups. That is how we draw the spinal ganglion. And whereas autonomic ganglion, when we are drawing, there is a capsule, the connective tissue capsule around it, and the neurons are smaller compared to that of the spinal ganglion. They are multipolar neurons. Okay, so this will be the shape, okay, irregular shape. And you can see nerve fibers that is running between them. What about the nucleus? The nucleus is eccentric in position. So this is how we draw the autonomic ganglion. first class, practical class for nervous tissue, we will draw the peripheral nerve, optic nerve, and the structure of neuron. Whereas in the second class of nervous tissue, in the next week, second class of nervous tissue, we will draw the spinal ganglion and the autonomic ganglion. So our next topic is the synapse. Synapse is the contact points between the neighboring neurons for transmission of signal from one neuron to another. What are the different types of synapse? Based on the parts of the neuron that is taking part in the synapse, we have different types. We have the axodendritic, axosomatic, axoaxonic, and dendrodendritic. So this is a diagram showing the axons are synapsing with the dendrites. So these are axodendritic synapses. This is axon is synapsing with the cell body. So this is axosomatic. And axon, here also this is axosomatic. What about this one? Between the axon and the axon. So axoaxonic synapse. So these are the types of synapse based on the part of the neuron which is taking part in the synapse. Then we have the synapse that is based on the method in which the impulse is transmitted from one neuron to another. So if it is some neurotransmitters that are involved, it is chemical synapse. And if it is some ions which are involved, it is known as electrical synapse. So coming to chemical synapse, that is more common. The impulses are transmitted from one neuron to another neuron, and it is always in one direction only. Here, what are the components of the chemical synapse? There are three components. One is the presynaptic membrane, the other is the postsynaptic membrane, and then there is a gap between these two, and that is called the synaptic cleft. Okay, so the presynaptic membrane is actually the terminal boton of the presynaptic neuron, and it has many vesicles that is filled with neurotransmitters. So when the action potential reaches this terminal boton, what happens is there is influx of calcium from the extracellular space, and that will cause the exocytosis of all these synaptic vesicles, and the neurotransmitter is released to the space that is a synaptic cleft. It is a small space of 20 to 30 nanometers, and this neurotransmitter is going to diffuse through the synaptic cleft to reach the postsynaptic membrane. And the postsynaptic membrane is slightly thickened, and it has the receptors for the neurotransmitters that is released. And based on the type of neurotransmitters, the response of the postsynaptic membrane can be excitatory or inhibitory. So what are the different types of neurotransmitters? We have excitatory and inhibitory neurotransmitters. Excitatory are acetylcholine, glutamate, and norepinephrine, and the inhibitory are the GABA and the serotonin. These are the common neurotransmitters that we see. So that is about the chemical synapse, where the impulse transmission is possible only in one direction. What about electrical synapse? So here it is the ions. Instead of neurotransmitters, it is ions that is passing from the presynaptic to the postsynaptic neuron via gap junctions. Here the impulse can travel in both the directions, and the conduction of the impulse is faster for an electrical synapse as compared to a chemical synapse. Now let us learn a few things about nerve injury. So what is the response of the nervous tissue to the injury? So the injury can happen either to the cell body or it can happen to the axon. The injury is happening to the cell body, then it results in death of the cell. And if injury is occurring to the axon, the following changes happens. This is the normal neuron with the Schwann cells in the myelin sheath. This is what happens if the injury is occurring at the axon. There are some changes that is going to happen in the distal segment as well as the proximal segment. So there is going to be degeneration. Degeneration will happen in both distal segment as well as proximal segment. So in the distal segment, what happens? The axon and the myelin sheath are going to undergo degeneration. This type of degeneration is known as Wallerian degeneration or anterograde degeneration. Okay, this is the anterograde degeneration. So this degeneration in the distal segment is known as Wallerian degeneration. This is very important. What about the proximal segment? So in the proximal segment also there is going to be a degeneration. But that degeneration will happen only till the next node of Ranvier. Okay, up to the next node of Ranvier, because the total effect of the injury to the nerve, there will be slight degeneration in the proximal segment up to the next node of Ranvier. And this type of degeneration is known as retrograde degeneration. So these are the changes that is happening in the axon. So will anything happen to the cell body? Yes, we can see there are some changes in the cell body compared to the normal neuron. We can see there is a shift in the nucleus position. The nucleus has become eccentric. Okay, the nucleus has shifted, it has come to the side. Another thing is the Nissl bodies that were usually present, that will disappear. So this phenomenon is known as chromatolysis. So what is chromatolysis? When the nucleus becomes eccentric in position and the Nissl bodies disappear in response to injury. This is known as chromatolysis, the changes that is occurring in the cell body. Now after degeneration is happening, slowly the nerve will start regeneration. So how will the nerve regenerate? That is, there is proliferation of Schwann cells. So here there is proliferation of Schwann cells. These Schwann cells are arranged as longitudinal columns to bridge the gap between the proximal segment and distal segment. This proliferation of Schwann cells is going to bridge this gap. From the proximal segment of the axon, numerous small processes are going to sprout out. And the sprouting processes pass through the Schwann cell columns, and it is going to re-establish the continuity of the axons. Once the continuity of the axon is re-established, myelin sheath is going to be laid down by the Schwann cell. So this is what happens when there is injury to the nerve tissue. Okay. Now we'll see a few clinical correlates. What is this condition? This is the normal axon with the myelin sheath around it, and in this condition we can see the myelin sheath has been damaged. So this condition is known as multiple sclerosis. It is an autoimmune condition that affects the nerves within the central nervous system, and one of the most commonly affected nerve is the optic nerve. There are many other tracts of the central nervous system which are also affected by multiple sclerosis. We will be learning this in detail later when we learn the neuroanatomy. It's an autoimmune condition that is known as multiple sclerosis, and the symptoms depends upon the tracts or the nerves that are involved. So there can be motor paralysis, there can be loss of coordination or sensation. Even there are nerves that are controlling the bowel and bladder movement can also be involved. There is multiple sclerosis. This is a section of the ear. Okay, this is the external ear, this is the middle ear, this is the internal ear. Now from the internal ear, related to the internal ear, we have this nerve. This is the eighth nerve, whereas this is the seventh nerve, which is in close relation to the eighth nerve. Okay, so now from this eighth nerve, we can see a tumor is arising from the Schwann cells. This tumor is known as schwannoma. Tumor of the Schwann cells. It is actually a benign tumor, and most commonly the eighth cranial nerve is involved. Other peripheral nerves can also be involved in schwannoma. Most of the brain tumors that we see are neuroglial in origin, and most common among the tumors that is arising from the neuroglial cells are arising from the astrocytes. So these tumors are called the astrocytoma. So that is all about the nervous tissue. So in the second practical class, we need to draw the spinal ganglion and the autonomic ganglion. Thank you.